want to tell you today that this marks a major milestone in my life. So it's pretty special for me. I came to Stillwater about 9 years ago, and as a Southern boy, you probably didn't guess that. And then, and for the first 2 years I was here, I used an interpreter and frequently resorted to sign language to communicate with the folks around Stillwater. And here I find myself just 7 years later, able to come here and speak to you in your native tongue. My family came up from Virginia today to join me, my wife Pat, my daughter Jennifer, who works in the Pentagon on the staff of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and my son Jeff, who is a former Marine. I heard a couple of grumbles out there, man, so I want to acknowledge as a Navy man that there is no such thing as a former Marine, and we're very sensitive to that. Navy men can be trained. It's sort of like training a pup, be housebroken, and we can honor the Marine Corps properly. Today marks a very special day. It's a day to honor our country and honor our veterans and those that served. And I can see the carnations, but I'd like to just ask everybody who has served in the military to please just raise your hand. And I would like to say on behalf of a very, very grateful nation, thank you to all of you for your service. When I was invited to speak today, it was suggested to me that I might talk about 9/11. I was pleased to do that because I think 9/11 was a very important day in the lives of our country and for sure all the people who were there. I think most of us probably remember where we were on that day, what happened. It changed our lives and the lives of this nation and frankly the lives of much of the world forever. My perspective of 9/11 comes mostly from the Pentagon because that's where I was. And to understand what happened on 9/11, you really need to understand a little bit about the Pentagon and what it is like. May I ask, is there anyone here who's been to the Pentagon or knows very much about it? I'm not surprised to see, I see one, but I'm not surprised to see that most folks don't. It's not a place that most of the people have a chance to visit, but it's a very significant building. It was built in 1941 to 1943. The build-up to World War II to house in a single building the War Department. It is a structure of concrete and reinforced steel. It is built more like a fortress than it is a building. It's huge. The footprint of the Pentagon is 29 acres. It has 17 and a half miles of corridor inside the building, and on a given day it houses 25,000 people. The center of the Pentagon is a courtyard, a circular courtyard about 3 acres in size. And around that courtyard there is a 5-sided building. It's 5 stories high and there's a basement underneath. And then there's a little alleyway and then there's another 5-sided building just like the first one around that, and it continues. And the center ring is the A ring, and then there's the B ring, and the C ring, and the D ring, and the E ring is the outer one. And there are 10 corridors that go out from the courtyard to the E ring that allow transportation of people and things throughout the complex. On the morning of 9/11, I was assigned as the Director of Surface Warfare on the staff of the Chief of Naval Operations. The The Pentagon was in the process of undergoing a big renovation, the first major one since it had been constructed. And they were modernizing the offices, and they were putting in a lot of features for security and safety, like safety glass in the windows and those sorts of things. And my staff had just been moved back into our offices as part of that renovation, and half of my staff was in the Pentagon, and the other half of the staff was about a mile away in a commercial district called Christmas City. I was sitting in the office that morning with my senior officers, and we had been given a very important job. And that job was to execute what was being referred to by senior people in Washington, D.C. as a peace dividend. The idea was to recognize that our country, when 9/11 was not at war, and therefore, because we were at peace, we had the opportunity to take advantage of that, reduce our armed forces, save some money, and apply that money other places. Some of us who were there, who had been in the military for decades and traveled the world, didn't really agree with what we were doing because we knew the world was not a safe place. But we had been given specifically the job to decommission 2 carrier battle groups. That's the aircraft carrier, the air wing, and all the cruisers and destroyers that go with them. And we were setting about doing that, and I was in my office with those people, and the door opened. My aide ran in real quick, and he said, "Admiral, you've got to turn on the TV right now. A plane has just hit the South Tower of the World Trade Center." Took us a while to get the TV on because I'd never had it on before. But we did, and just as it came on, we could see the smoke coming out of the tower, and we all assumed the same thing. Well, it's a commercial aircraft, a Piper Cub. It got off course, and the pilot may have had a medical emergency, and it hit the building. And then right there on the TV, just at that moment, we saw the second plane as it hit the other tower. And it wasn't a Piper Cub. It was a commercial airliner, and everybody in that room knew right then the world wasn't going to be the same. So I told my people to leave the office, get out there and start making some preparations because our day was fixing to change. We didn't know how, but we knew it was going to be different. And so they did, and I was standing in the office in front of my desk right up against that window with that new safety glass, and that's when the explosion occurred. And the explosion came from down below me. I was on the 5th floor, and I'd been gazing over the roof of the Pentagon from that office, and I didn't see anything, but all of a sudden the explosion came from down on the, turned out to be the 2nd deck below me. And there was a bunch of concrete and wood and debris that slammed into that new window. And thank goodness the safety glass held. I turned around, I went out into the space, and I told the people there that they needed to prepare to leave the space because it was obvious that we had a real problem. Now, I thought at the time that this is part of a coordinated attack with the World Trade Center aircraft, but I thought it was a bomb because it was in the center of the Pentagon. It was in that C ring. It was right in the middle of all that structure. I'd been looking over the roof of the Pentagon. I didn't see airplanes or anything. So I knew it had to be a bomb, but I knew it was part of the attack. So we told our people to leave the offices and go out in the passageways, and they did, and all of a sudden they turned around, came back in, and said, "Admiral, we can't get out. There's smoke, there's debris, there's things blocking the passageways." And so we said, "Okay, go out the back door," and the back door was a stairway that wound down from the 5th deck all the way down to the ground and the alleyway between the B ring and the C ring. My people evacuated except for myself and my executive assistant and my aide, and we stayed behind, made sure there was some classified material locked up, and then and everybody was out, and then we went down the same ladder way. And when we came into that alley, we looked, and in front of us in the C ring, on the 2nd deck of the C ring and the 3rd deck, there were black gaping holes. and the windows were gone. And inside the holes it was total black and dark, except for the flames that were burning. And you could see some wires and things hanging down. And there was no question that there were people in the spaces. The spaces in question were the brand new Navy Command Center that had just been moved into as part of the renovation. There was a wire mesh screen across the alleyway, and it ran up very, very high, and it was heavy wire, but we knew right away we had to get inside that wire screen to get access to those bombed out windows, because it was clear we were going to have to get people out of those windows. And so I did what admirals do. I told a bunch of sailors and soldiers who were standing there to take down that wire screen, having no earthly idea how they were going to do it, because we didn't have any tools, we didn't have anything. And they did exactly what sailors, Marines, airmen, and people like that do. They tore down the wire screen. I don't know how to this day they did it, but they tore it down. And we went through and we went up to those windows, and by the time we got there were people in them wanting to jump. In fact, they were gonna jump. So we formed two quick teams, and we had them get in circles, and they locked their arms together and they built a human net. And the people would jump out of the windows and they'd catch them in the net. They'd take the people out of the net with their broken arms and legs and burns all over their body, and they'd hand them off to other people, soldiers, sailors in particular, standing there, and they would take them, and they'd take them down the alleyway and then through the building down where they could get through and into the courtyard where we thought they would get medical triage. My concern at the moment was just get the people out, because I knew we were going to have help, because I knew a bomb had gone off right there, and I knew I was at the tip of the spear, and all those resources, the firemen, the police, the security people, everybody was going to come there, because that's where it was at. And nobody came. And we're continuing to help these people as best we can. And then I told my aide, I said, go down and go to the courtyard and find somebody and tell them where to bring the teams, the first responders. And he did, and he ran down there, and he came back in a few minutes, and he said, Admiral, there's nobody there to talk to. There are no teams. So we kept working on things, and then we had gotten teams together at the same time that, in addition to the ones on the windows, to go into the building and try to find people that were injured and bring them out as well. By now, there's a lot of smoke coming out of the windows and everything, and this is going on. So I sent another messenger to find the team. Altogether, I sent 3. None of them can find anybody. I couldn't understand why. We're where the damage is. Why isn't everybody coming here? Well, about that time, the second bomb exploded in the building. Turns out, in retrospect, I didn't know it at the time, it was a fuel tank from the airplane, from American Flight 77, the airplane that actually had hit the Pentagon and had caused this damage. Flight 77 impacted the Pentagon on the second deck, on the outer E-ring of the Pentagon, and it came through the building, disintegrating, of course, on impact, and it went all the way to the Navy Command Center in the C-ring. And everything in the path of that airplane was totally destroyed. Subsequent to that, from the fires that burned, the floors above the second floor, second deck, collapsed in that area, and they fell in on top of things too. Fortunately, due to the heroic actions of some of those sailors and soldiers, not only where we were, but in other parts of the Pentagon, a lot of people were gotten out and lives were saved, but still a lot of lives were lost. So no one came, and so then a security guard comes up, and he came into the alleyway, and he had a radio, and he said, you've got to evacuate now, because we've got word there's an airplane headed to the Pentagon that's going to be here any minute. Well, by now the smoke from the second explosion was really bad. It was much blacker, much more thickness to it, and so we had nothing to breathe with, so it was getting very hard to stay there. And I turned to all the folks there with me and I said, okay, they told us we've got to get out of here. There's another airplane on the way, and they think we're the target. And to the man, every person there said, we're not leaving. And they didn't. And so we stayed, and we continued to go into the building, trying to find the people and get them out. At that time, I said, I've got to get help. I've got to get help somewhere. 3 people couldn't find it, so I'll go myself. So I took my aide and one other guy, and we ran down the alleyway, and we went through the Pentagon and worked our way through the basement, and we came out into a parking lot called the mall parking, and that's where it happened to be my car was parked. And I came out into that parking lot, and there were only 2 people there, and they were both guards. And I said, where is everybody? Give me a fire team, and let us go back. We've got to get back in there. They made a radio call, and the word came back, there is no one to send. And I said, well, then give us some breathing apparatus, and we'll go back and see what we can do. He called again, and the word came back, we don't have anything. At that point, I told the security guy, come with me, we're going to go back. And we started back into the building, and we discovered that the safety security door is a one-way door. And when we came out and it shut, it locked, and we couldn't get back in. So for a second, I didn't know what I was going to do, and then the door opened. And it was all of my folks coming out. And they said, Admiral, we had to evacuate. The smoke was just so overpowering, we couldn't stay there anymore, and there's no one there now. Well, at that point, I still didn't know it was an airplane, and I didn't know where the responders were, and I didn't know what was going on, but I did know this. Thousands of people were streaming out of the Pentagon, going down the highways and the streets, running and crying and helping each other. And I knew I had to get to some place to get communications to find out what had happened to my people and what we were going to do. So I jumped in the car with my 2 staff members, and we started driving out of the parking lot. And as we did, the police were yelling at us, and I was looking in my rearview mirror, and I could see them securing the roads and putting up barriers and everything. And we made our way down and got on Highway 66, went straight out to Falls Church, where I live, and went to my house, and we set up a mini command center there at the house and started calling back to our folks in Crystal City. And in a matter of just a few minutes, we had the entire directorate mustered, all due to the professionalism of those folks in Crystal City who were making that happen. 9/11 was a horrific day. It changed our world. You know that if you've ever flown on an airplane since 9/11. Look at what we do now. Look at the personal inconvenience, but also the economic cost and all the prices that are being paid all across America because of what happened on that day. But 9/11 was also a day when some really good things happened. It was a day that united this country. We became one people again. We had drifted off the mark a little bit then. We were in that peace dividend thing, and when you get in that mindset, people start to think about things as being important that really aren't that important. There are conveniences, there are things we like to have, there are those nice to have. We start to think we're important. We start to think we're all-knowing. We're pretty smart. We know what all the answers are, and we'll do it our way. And all those things happen in a peace dividend time, and we're not united. We bicker, we fight, we fuss. And on 9/11, all that went away. And all you had to, patriotism was suddenly rampant across the country, thank God. And you could drive down any highway in this land and you could look at an overpass and there would be the stars and stripes and kids and people waving flags and stuff. We had a resurrection of patriotism. And we had a turn for service to country. Young men and women all across the country giving up the things they had thought were very important in their lives to join the military or to join the first responders, the police, the firefighters, and to serve the country. And a generation of Americans turned to do that. We learned on 9/11, once again, freedom is not free. You got to earn it, you got to work for it, and you got to have vigilance every single day, because it's a fleeting thing that can be taken from you in just a moment if you're not on your guard. There's a document that this country is founded on, the Constitution. And the real foundation of the Constitution is its profession that men are free. And we'll always be free. And it makes this country unique. And it has stood the test of time for 250 years. Before Benjamin Franklin got shocked with his kite, and before Thomas and Edison got a light bulb to come on, all before that document was written, and it is just as applicable and just as important to our freedom today as it was the day it was written. But there's something more important than the Constitution, and it is the true foundation upon which the Constitution is written, and that is God. That's what the founding fathers were focused on when they wrote that document. And that's where that freedom comes from. That's where all of our rights, all of our privileges comes from. It doesn't come from a government, not even our government. It comes from a heavenly Father, a divine heavenly Father that gives that to all of us. Our job is just to protect it. Embedded in that, and God has taught us, is the importance of service. Service to others, service to our country, service to God, and dedication to mission. That we're going to go do what has to be done, even when the odds are pretty stacked against us, even when it's a tough hill to climb, even when we're scared like we were on 9/11 because we didn't really know even who the enemy was at that moment in time. It's also true that God teaches us that there will be times when love of others is more important than love of self. Back during that peace dividend, we were thinking a lot about ourselves and what we wanted and the creature comforts we could have. And the truth is, we need to be thinking about others more than we were ourselves. And lastly, God teaches us that sacrifice is the ultimate virtue. The willing to step out and do something about it yourself, to make something happen because you step forward and make it happen. That's what happened on 9/11. That's when all those people joined the services and the first responders. They took it upon themselves to make a difference, and they did. We saw the traits that we learned in this church and other churches around the land demonstrated on 9/11 clearly. We saw those brave, selfless actions of our fellow Americans at the World Trade Center, in those buildings and around those buildings, at the Pentagon, in the halls and corridors, in that darkness. And on Flight 993 over Shanksville, Pennsylvania, when that crew, amazingly, with incredulous courage, rushed that pilot and took down that airplane before it could do damage to other people. Today, you have in your auditorium here, you have a banner that hangs there. And that banner says, "It is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God." George Washington, a founding father. As he was penning the Constitution and working with people to do that, that was the message he held to his heart, he held dear. Truer words were never spoken. If this nation is to do what it needs to do today, I suggest to you we need another awakening. We've drifted off that mark again, in my humble opinion. We started thinking about ourselves, and we actually think we're pretty important again. And we're starting to bicker and fuss, fight among ourselves about everything. Some things I never thought you could possibly even come up with, and we fight about those. And the truth is, if we want to fix this, we need to follow what that banner says. And we need to understand that the answer to all this will not be in this government. It'll be in this church, and it'll be in that Heavenly Father. And we got to bring that back into the conversation. When I got here, Stillwater Church was unknown to me, but not too long after that, we had a pretty good flood here in 2018. And some of you may remember that. I remember it hanging from a helicopter over here when they got me out of the thing. But I watched this church, and then the tornado that came not too long after that, and I watched how you turn to help people who are in need. Some of them total strangers. You don't know who they are. But you turn out to help them. I also know that you do the same thing for people when there's not a national or a disaster of some kind or a natural disaster. But it's just there are people around the community here in Columbia County that need help. And I've seen how this church turns out for that too. So I know you're good folks, and I know you do good things. But I leave you with one thought. Please understand that I believe you are the hope of this nation. You and people like you in 1,000 churches across this country. And now is the time that if we all stand up and we all do what the banner says and we understand it's God that's going to give us the answer. And He's got to be part of the answer. And we unify and we go forward, we can have the impact of another 9/11. And it's about time to do it, I would suggest. Once again, to all the veterans here today, and that includes the families that are here with them, because being a Navy guy, I know that it's a family business. And for all who have sacrificed and done the things that you have done over the years, I thank you very much, and our country thanks you very much. May God bless America.